When my daughter-in-law handed me a cup of coffee with a sweet smile, I knew something was wrong. The smell was strange, and my instincts ended up saving my life while uncovering a truth that changed it forever. My name is Monica Carter. I'm 72 years old, and I live in Savannah, Georgia. I never thought there would come a day when I'd have to tell this story, the day I realized that someone I once called family wanted to harm me. Now, as I sit on my porch, watching the late afternoon sun spill across the quiet street, I feel compelled to share what happened a few months ago. I've always been a strong, independent woman. My mother taught me to care for family, even when they didn't deserve it. I lived by that lesson my whole life, maybe too long, until I finally learned that being kind isn't the same as being foolish. That morning, I was in my son Daniel's kitchen, preparing breakfast for my grandkids as I had done for the past 3 years. Sophie, my 16-year-old granddaughter, had to leave early for school, while Ethan, 13, was still asleep. I was used to waking up at 5:30 a.m., cooking for everyone, and cleaning up while Daniel and Olivia, my daughter-in-law, got ready for work. Olivia usually came downstairs around 8 a.m., always with the attitude that getting out of bed was an accomplishment. But that morning, she was up earlier than usual, dressed sharply in a blouse and skirt I'd never seen before. It was odd she hadn't mentioned any special meetings or events. She greeted me with a forced smile, the kind people wear when they're pretending to be friendly. Olivia said she wanted to make me a special cup of coffee to thank me for everything I did for the family. Her words sounded insincere, but I decided to ignore them. While she fussed with the coffee machine, I set the breakfast table as usual. Something in the air felt off. The atmosphere was tense, like something was being hidden. Olivia talked nonstop about the weather, the neighbors, even random news from the TV. I knew she only did that when she was nervous. When she handed me the cup, our eyes met for just a second, but it was enough to send chills down my spine. There was no warmth or gratitude in her gaze, only calculation and coldness. She told me I deserved to be treated like a queen. The irony was almost laughable since she rarely spoke to me at all. The smell of the coffee was unusual. It had the familiar aroma, but with an odd, sweet, almost nauseating undertone. I lifted the cup to my lips, but my intuition screamed, "Don't drink it." Just then, Helen, Olivia's mother, walked into the kitchen. She had been staying with us for a few days to visit her daughter. Helen was the arrogant type, always convinced she knew best. When she saw my cup, she said she wanted one just like it. In that instant, I made a decision that changed everything. When Olivia turned her back to grab another cup, I quietly slid mine toward the sink, right where Helen was standing. I didn't know why, I just knew I had to. When Olivia turned around, Helen had already picked up the original cup, the one meant for me, and took a sip. Olivia poured another cup for her mother, completely unaware of what had just happened. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to drink. I only pretended to take a sip, watching her carefully. Her eyes stayed fixed on me, searching for a reaction. Helen, oblivious, drank her coffee and said it was delicious. 20 minutes later, as I sat in the living room reading a magazine, I heard strange noises from the kitchen, groaning, clattering. I rushed in to find Helen collapsed over the table, pale, drenched in sweat, vomiting uncontrollably. Olivia screamed, pretending to panic, calling 911, claiming her mother must have eaten something bad. But when our eyes met, I saw it. That pure, unmistakable fear, not for her, the mother's life, but for being caught. Helen was rushed to the hospital. The doctor said she had severe poisoning but was lucky to survive. Olivia made up a story about spoiled food or stomach issues, but I knew the truth. That cup had been meant for me. Just observation watching Olivia fake concern, lie to the doctors, and avoid my gaze. That's when I realized the person I once considered family had tried to end my life. That night, lying awake in my dark room, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't live under the same roof as someone who wanted me dead. I couldn't be the naive mother and grandmother who believed love could fix everything. I picked up the phone and called a few old friends, not the police, but people who could help me leave this situation with dignity. People who had known me for decades and knew I wasn't the kind of woman to make up stories. By 3 a.m., I had a plan. I wouldn't confront her directly. I wouldn't cause a scene. I would do something Olivia would never see coming. Something that would change my life completely and help me regain what I'd lost long ago: safety, self-respect, and the right to live without fear. That night, the house felt silent in a way I'd never experienced before, the silence of awakening. And no matter how painful the truth was, it gave me strength to change everything. No one else knew that the cup of strange-smelling coffee wasn't just part of a murder attempt. It was the beginning of a new Monica. A Monica who would no longer tolerate being disrespected. A Monica ready to fight for her own life. And from that moment on, I knew my story had entered a completely different chapter. Every gesture, every word after that felt like acting in a play, pretending to still be the gentle, devoted grandmother. Olivia tried to act normal too, but I could tell she was uneasy. She avoided being alone with me, always finding excuses to step out when I entered a room. Whenever we spoke, her voice was rushed and tense, as if she just wanted the conversation to end. I smiled politely, as I always did, but quietly noted every little detail in my mind. One Saturday morning, he looked at me and asked, "Mom, are you okay? Do you need anything? You've been quieter lately." I looked at the son I had raised on my own after my ex-husband Frank left for another woman, and my heart ached. How could I tell him that his wife once tried to harm me? How could I explain that the woman he loved saw his mother as a burden to get rid of? I simply replied softly, "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired. Must be my age." Daniel hugged me and said, "Mom, you're the strongest woman I've ever known. I really admire you." Those words brought tears to my eyes, but that was exactly why I couldn't let Daniel get involved. He'd already been hurt enough when his father left, and he'd worked hard to build his own happiness. I wouldn't be the one to destroy that, but that didn't mean I would stand still. I began to think back on everything that led me to this point. After Frank left me for a woman 20 years younger, I poured all my energy into raising Daniel. I worked as a cook in 3 restaurants at the same time, always choosing the day shift so I could be home when he returned from school. There were nights when I came home with aching feet, smelling like grease, yet still sat with Daniel to help with homework. While other mothers spent weekends taking their kids out, I worked extra hours catering buffet events to afford his clothes and books. Daniel grew into a responsible, caring man who always thought of others. When I finally paid off the little house in the suburbs, he had already started working and insisted on helping with my living expenses. He often said, "Mom, you've sacrificed your whole life for me. Now it's my turn to take care of you." I was proud to have raised such a son. When Daniel met Olivia, I was truly happy. She was young, had a steady job at a furniture store, and seemed to love him deeply. At first, she treated me kindly, calling me Mom with affection, praising my cooking, saying Daniel was lucky to have a mother like me. Their wedding took place in a small garden in Charleston, filled with sunlight and laughter. I used part of my savings to help them have the perfect ceremony. Watching my son smile that day, I thought my life had finally found peace. When Sophie was born, I felt like I was living again. Being a grandmother was easier than being a mother. I could love, nurture, and make memories without the same weight of responsibility. After her maternity leave, Olivia went back to work, and I volunteered to babysit full-time. Those were wonderful days. Sophie was such a sweet, cheerful girl, so calm in my arms. I sang her the lullabies I used to sing to Daniel, told her stories, played with her. At the time, Olivia was grateful and often said, "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mom." But when Ethan was born 2 years later, things began to change. Olivia became irritable, constantly complaining about how hard it was to care for 2 kids. I suggested that I move in for a while to help out more. It seemed like the perfect solution. At first, they had a big house with a private living space for me, and I could still rent out my apartment for extra income. Daniel was thrilled, saying how wonderful it would be for the whole family to live together. Olivia agreed, but in her eyes, I caught a flicker of cold hesitation. The first few months went smoothly. I woke up early every day, made breakfast, took Sophie to school, and watched Ethan while Olivia was at work. By the time they came home, dinner was ready. The kids were clean and fed. I felt useful, needed, like I truly belonged there. But slowly, I began noticing subtle changes in Olivia's behavior. She started criticizing small things: the way I brushed Sophie's hair, the seasoning in my food, how I organized the house. She said she had her own way of doing things, and that I didn't need to worry so much. I tried to adapt, to ask before doing anything, but nothing I did ever seemed right. If I bathed the kids, she said the water was too hot. If I didn't, she said I was lazy. If I cooked, she frowned. If I didn't, she sighed as if the world was on her shoulders. Daniel didn't seem to notice the tension building. My son would come home from work, play with the kids, eat dinner, and watch TV. Whenever I tried to bring it up, he just smiled and said, "It's just women's stuff, Mom. Don't worry about it." I understood he didn't want to be caught between his wife and his mother, but that made me feel even lonelier. Things got worse when Olivia's friends started coming over more often. They gathered for lunch, coffee, endless chatter. I usually stayed in my room to give them space, but I could still hear their laughter and voices echoing through the house. One afternoon, while folding the kids' clothes, I overheard a conversation that broke my heart. One of Olivia's friends said, "You're so lucky having a mother-in-law who does everything like free housekeeping." Olivia laughed and replied, "Yeah, sometimes that's true. She just likes to do everything herself." Another woman joked, "You're basically living like a queen." Olivia chuckled softly. "It's nice, but sometimes it's annoying. I don't have any freedom in my own house. She's always around, watching, meddling in everything." Those words felt like a slap in the face. I, the woman who only wanted to help and love her family, was being treated like an intruder. I had given up my privacy, changed my entire life, only to be seen as a burden. That's when I realized my presence was no longer welcome. But I didn't yet know that what was coming next would be far crueler. I began to withdraw. Whenever Olivia's friends came over, I'd go for a walk in the nearby park. When they had parties or family gatherings, I stayed in my room. At meals, I spoke less, smiled less. I thought if I disappeared a little, Olivia would feel more comfortable. But instead, things only got worse. She began making subtle comments about my age, saying that older people got sick easily, that we needed special care, and that it was risky to have elderly family members living in the house. She'd say things like, "I just worry something might happen to you at night, and we wouldn't know what to do." Those words unsettled me deeply. I started to wonder if I really was a burden, if my very presence was somehow disrupting their lives. Around that same time, my health began to weaken slightly. Nothing serious, just high blood pressure, joint pain, and some insomnia. But Olivia exaggerated everything. Every pill I took, every doctor's visit, every small cough. She told Daniel she was just concerned about Mom, that maybe I needed to see a geriatric specialist, even suggesting they look into some senior care homes nearby just for information. Daniel brushed it off, insisting I was fine and healthy. But I could see it. Olivia's words had planted seeds of doubt in his mind. He started asking more about my health, urging me to see the doctor more often, watching me closely like he was afraid I might fall at any moment. My neighbor of more than 15 years, Evelyn, noticed the change. Every time she saw me at the market or in the park, she'd say I looked thinner, more tired. She once asked, "Monica, are you happy living with your son?" I always smiled and said I was fine, that I loved my grandkids and enjoyed helping the family. But Evelyn knew I was hiding something. She looked at me for a moment and said quietly, "Your eyes don't shine like they used to. That smile, it looks forced." One afternoon, as we sat together on a park bench, she spoke frankly. "A family that truly loves you will never make you feel like a burden. If you're constantly afraid of being in the way, it means someone's making you feel that way." Her words pierced right through me. I wasn't ready to admit it then, but deep down, I knew she was right. I had lost my natural peace, my sense of belonging. I was living in a constant state of fear, tiptoeing like a stranger in my own home. And it was in that fragile state that I reached the fateful Thursday morning, the day Olivia handed me that strange-smelling cup of coffee. At that point, I was weak, feeling like a burden, doubting my own worth. Maybe that's why my instincts were so sharp. When someone has lived too long feeling unwanted, they can always tell when someone truly wants them gone. I began noticing changes in Olivia's daily routine. She started leaving for work earlier and coming home later, always with excuses like last-minute meetings or overtime. But when I called the furniture store where she worked, her coworkers said she'd been leaving early and sometimes didn't show up at all. One afternoon, while I was hanging laundry outside, I heard Olivia talking on the phone in her room. Her voice was low, but I caught a few words. "No, she's still here. I need another plan." My heart stopped. That conversation clearly wasn't about work or anything normal. I also started noticing how she treated my grandchildren. Sophie and Ethan, who used to be so close to me, slowly began to drift away. Olivia had been planting ideas in their minds. She told them I was forgetful, that they shouldn't bother Grandma when she was resting, that old people needed peace and quiet. Sophie, who once loved telling me about her school days, became distant. When I tried to talk to her, she'd give short answers and leave the room. Ethan, who used to beg me to tell him bedtime stories, started saying he wanted his mom to tuck him in instead. I felt like I was losing my grandchildren, that Olivia was teaching them to see me as nothing but an inconvenience. But I couldn't blame them, they were innocent children, simply mirroring the adults around them. I knew I couldn't carry this pain alone anymore, so I decided to go talk to Evelyn. That day, when Olivia went out and the kids were already at school, I walked over to Evelyn's house. She was watering flowers in her garden, her warm smile making me feel calmer than I had in months. We sat on the porch, and for the first time in a long while, I let everything out: Olivia's cruel words, the feeling of being disrespected, the strange cup of coffee, and all my suspicions. Evelyn listened in silence, her face gradually growing more serious. When I finished, she took my hands and said softly, "Monica, you have to leave that house. She doesn't just want you gone, she wants you gone for good." Her words sent a chill down my spine, but also gave me strength. She told me she'd recently seen several unfamiliar cars parked outside Daniel's house, with strangers coming and going. She had thought they were friends or co-workers, but now she wasn't so sure. Evelyn also said she overheard Olivia talking to a neighbor, saying I was confused, forgetful, and not really all there. The neighbor had even suggested a few senior living facilities for people with memory problems. When I heard that, my blood ran cold. Olivia was preparing to make me look mentally incompetent so that if anything ever happened, everyone would believe I had already lost my mind. No one would ever suspect it was all part of her carefully staged plan. Following Evelyn's advice, I needed to see a doctor to get an official medical statement proving that I was completely lucid and consult a lawyer to learn how to protect myself before it was too late. That afternoon, I called Dr. Harris, who had been my physician for many years. I asked for a full checkup, including neurological tests, and explained that I needed a written medical report confirming my full mental capacity. The doctor was a bit surprised, but quickly understood the seriousness. He knew I had always been sharp and independent. He promised to run every necessary test and provide a detailed report confirming that my cognitive abilities were entirely normal. While waiting for the results, I began documenting everything, every word Olivia said, every unusual behavior, every small change I noticed. I didn't know if it would help, but I knew I needed proof. Then one morning, when everyone had left for work and the kids were at school, I decided to tidy up Daniel's office as usual. When I opened his desk drawer, I found a strange folder inside, where estimates from nursing homes, brochures from senior care centers, and even documents about involuntary admission. Everything was neatly organized in a file folder with my name, Monica Carter, handwritten on the cover. There were also detailed notes about my daily routines and supposed episodes of confusion. But what froze my blood was a printed group chat conversation between Olivia and her friends, where she fabricated stories about my mental health condition. She claimed I had become dangerous, that I forgot to turn off the stove, that sometimes I didn't recognize familiar people. All lies. I had never forgotten to turn off the stove, never mistaken anyone. But Olivia was building a fake narrative, creating false evidence to justify having me committed one day. She was essentially crafting her own file of my imaginary dementia, preparing everything to prove that I had lost mental capacity whenever she needed to. My hands trembled as I took photos of every document with my phone, but I knew this was the only evidence I had. I put everything back exactly as I found it, to avoid suspicion, but now I had the truth. That evening, when Daniel came home from work, I looked at him differently. Did he know about this plan? Or was he just another victim of Olivia's manipulation? Or worse, was he her accomplice? Daniel was still kind and gentle as always, but I noticed how closely he was watching me, asking about my health, paying attention to every little movement. During dinner, Olivia casually mentioned that she had scheduled an appointment for me with a geriatric specialist, just as a precaution. She spoke in that soft, fake concerned tone, saying she was just worried about Mom, that lately she seems a bit forgetful. Daniel nodded and said that prevention was better than cure. I smiled and pretended to agree, but inside, I knew exactly what was happening. This was the next step in Olivia's plan. She had probably already spoken with the doctor, planting her story about the declining, senile mother-in-law. That night, I made the most important decision of my life. I would not wait any longer. I would not let her continue manipulating or erasing me from existence. I would fight back using her own weapons: intelligence, patience, and precision. I called Evelyn and told her everything I had found. She was shocked and worried, but also proud that I had faced the truth. She urged me to leave the house immediately, saying it was too dangerous to live under the same roof with someone capable of such deceit. But I didn't want to just run away in silence. I wanted Olivia to know that I had uncovered her plan. I wanted her to understand that she had underestimated me, that the frail old woman she despised was now more alert than ever. I wanted her to feel the same fear I had felt that morning when I held that strange-smelling cup of life, coffee in my hands. I began planning my counterattack. No direct confrontation, no noise. I would make her slowly realize that I knew everything, make her lose her calm, doubt herself, and fear her own shadow. I started with seemingly casual remarks during meals. It's terrifying hearing about people pretending to be mentally ill just to take advantage of others. Or, I just read about an elderly lady sent to a nursing home because someone mistook her for being confused. Each time, I noticed Olivia stiffen, her eyes darting away. She didn't dare respond; any word might expose her. Then I began showing interest in details she wanted to keep hidden, dropping vague comments like, "Someone strange was parked outside yesterday," or "I accidentally came across some interesting documents in the office." Never direct, just enough for her to know I was watching. Olivia began to unravel. She tried to act normal, but her eyes were restless, alert. She knew I was no longer the docile, gentle mother-in-law she could manipulate. There was something in my gaze now, something that truly frightened her. And then, one morning, when it was just the two of us in the kitchen, I looked straight into her eyes and said slowly, "Olivia, you know that I've found out everything, don't you?" Her face turned pale. She forced a smile, but I went on, speaking calmly about the documents, the messages, the plan she had built to destroy me. The kitchen fell into suffocating silence. Olivia quickly denied it, saying I was mistaken, that I needed rest. I just smiled, my voice calm but firm. "No need to pretend anymore, Olivia. We both know exactly what's going on." At that moment, I saw the real fear in her eyes. She knew she had lost control. The frail old lady she thought she could manipulate had become her greatest threat. She tried to argue, saying she was only protecting the family, that I was the one causing trouble. But I wasn't listening anymore. I told her I had evidence, and that if anything happened to me, people would know exactly where to look. I told her she had underestimated the 72-year-old woman she thought was weak, and that I would make her pay for it. Olivia was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, stripped of all fake sweetness. "You don't understand. I'm just trying to protect my family. You're the one destroying our lives." Right then, I knew her mask had completely fallen. Standing before me was no longer the polite daughter-in-law, but a cold, calculating woman capable of anything to get what she wanted. I looked straight into her eyes and said, calm but unshakable, "Olivia, you've made a serious mistake. You think I'm just a harmless old woman, but you're wrong." Then, slowly, each word like a knife, "From now on, you'll see what a 72-year-old woman can do when she decides to fight for her own life." After that confrontation in the kitchen, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Olivia had shown her true face, and I understood she wouldn't stop easily. I had to move fast but wisely, leaving her no chance to twist the situation or set another trap. That very morning, once Daniel and the kids had left the house, I called Dr. Harris to request an urgent appointment to discuss my test results. He told me that everything was perfect. My memory, reflexes, and cognitive abilities were all excellent, showing no signs of decline. I asked him to write a detailed report confirming that I was fully alert and mentally competent. I explained that my family had started doubting me and that I needed formal documentation to protect myself. He sounded concerned, asking if I was under emotional stress, but I told him it was just a precautionary measure. Then I called Evelyn, my close friend and longtime neighbor, asking her to pick me up because I had Perdunis, something urgent to do downtown, and I didn't want anyone at home to know. 30 minutes later, she arrived. The worried look in her eyes brought me comfort. On the drive, I told her everything about my confrontation with Olivia that morning. She was horrified, yet relieved, proud that I had finally stood up for myself. She said she'd always known I had that strength inside me. Our first stop was Wells Fargo Bank in downtown Savannah. I needed to review my finances. To my surprise, after years of saving and renting out my old house, I had more money than I thought. I spoke with the bank manager about safe investments options that would give me steady monthly income enough to live independently without relying on anyone. The feeling of financial freedom was like a breath of fresh air. Our next stop was Keller Realty, a real estate office. I wanted to know my home's market value and how quickly I could sell if necessary. The agent told me that property prices in my neighborhood were high and I could sell within 2 weeks. I also asked about smaller apartments downtown, somewhere neat, safe, and quiet. I wrote down a few addresses and scheduled viewings for the following week. During lunch at a small cafe near Forsyth Square, Evelyn asked me a question that made my heart sink. Monica, are you sure you don't want to talk to Daniel before making this decision? I was silent for a few minutes before answering. I love my son more than anything, but he's proven that he can't protect me from his own wife. For months, I've sent every signal that I wasn't okay, and he never saw it. If I tell him the truth about Olivia, he won't believe me. Or worse, he'll try to defend her. I don't want Daniel to have to choose between his mother and his wife. I'd rather leave with dignity than destroy his family. Evelyn held my hand and said softly, "Sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to walk away. You're stronger than ever, Monica." Our last stop of the day was the office of Michael Roberts, an attorney specializing in family law and senior rights. I told him everything, showed him the photos of the documents and my medical report. He was shocked by how calculated Olivia's plan was. He said that cases like this happen more often than people think. Many elderly individuals are deceived or manipulated by their own family. He guided me in drafting a written declaration confirming my full mental competence and stating clearly that I wished to live independently and would not allow anyone to interfere with my personal freedom. He also advised me to put in writing that any attempt to forcibly commit me to a facility or control my assets without my consent would be considered unlawful and treated as abduction. That afternoon, as I returned home, I felt like a completely new person. No longer the submissive, patient mother-in-law. I had become a woman with a plan, financial independence, and legal protection. Olivia had no idea that I had just built an unbreakable wall around myself. That evening, during dinner, I looked at everyone differently. Daniel cheerfully talked about work, unaware of the tension filling the room. Sophie and Ethan laughed and played, innocent and carefree. And Olivia, she stayed silent, avoiding my gaze. After dinner, while I was washing dishes, Olivia approached me, her voice low and cold. "I hope you're not planning to do anything stupid. You'd better forget about this morning's conversation. Let's pretend it never happened." I turned to her and smiled calmly. "Olivia, you still don't understand, do you? I'm done pretending everything's fine. I won't let anyone treat me like a burden. You created this situation and now you'll face the consequences." She tried to defend herself, saying I was overreacting, that we can still get along. But I didn't want to hear it. I had overcome fear, and she knew it. I told her she'd had months to treat me with respect, but chose manipulation and cruelty instead. In the following days, I began executing my plan to leave. I visited 3 apartments and chose one that I truly loved. A small place in downtown Savannah, with a balcony overlooking a park and filled with morning light. It was modest, but cozy, quiet, and affordable. I signed the lease that same day and quietly started packing. I didn't want to cause suspicion, so I did everything slowly and discreetly. I separated important papers, family photos, essential clothes, and a few sentimental keepsakes. Evelyn helped me buy some basic furniture for the new apartment, only what was necessary. A bed, a wardrobe, a small table, 2 chairs, and a few kitchen essentials. We just wanted everything ready for the day I would move out. During that time, I noticed Olivia growing increasingly tense. She tried to appear normal, but her eyes were always wary and anxious. Sometimes, I caught her watching me for long moments, as if trying to guess what I was planning. Daniel, my son, also began sensing that something was off. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Daniel asked softly, "Mom, is something wrong between you and Olivia?" I smiled gently and replied, "No, sweetheart. Everything's fine. I've just been thinking about the future, about the rest of my life." He looked worried and asked if I was planning to move out. He said he loved having me at home, that Sophie and Ethan needed me, that I was part of the family. Those words warmed my heart but also confirmed that Daniel had no idea what was really happening inside his own house. A week after signing the lease, I gathered the courage to take the next step. It was a Friday, and I knew it would be my last night sleeping in that house. I wanted to leave peacefully, without resentment. So I cooked a special dinner with everyone's favorite dishes: barbecue ribs for Daniel, salad for Olivia, and apple pie for the kids. A quiet farewell meal that only I knew about. During dinner, I looked at each face, each smile, trying to memorize everything. When the kids had gone to bed, I sat down with Daniel and Olivia in the living room. I spoke slowly. "I've been thinking a lot about my life and my future. I feel the need for independence, a space that truly belongs to me. I've decided to live on my own." Daniel was stunned. He tried to convince me there was no reason to leave, that everyone was happy having me there, but I stayed firm. I told them this wasn't a decision against them. It was something I needed to do for myself, to live the rest of my life with freedom and dignity. Olivia pretended to look concerned, saying sweetly, "We're going to miss you so much." But in her eyes, I saw it relief. She had finally gotten what she wanted, but in a clean way, without looking cruel. I told them I had already prepared everything, that I'd be moving into my new apartment the next morning, that I would always be Sophie and Ethan's grandmother, but I needed a place of my own, and I hoped they would respect that decision. Daniel was emotional, his voice breaking. "I feel like I've failed you, Mom. I always wanted you to be happy here. I don't understand what changed." I looked at him, touched but steady. "You haven't failed, Daniel. You're a wonderful son. This decision isn't about you or your family, it's about me taking back my own life." That night, I couldn't sleep, but not because of sadness, because of peace. For the first time in months, I felt in control of my life, making choices based on what I needed, not what others expected. I knew the next day would be hard, with tears and goodbyes, but I also knew I was doing the right thing. I was choosing dignity, safety, and peace. I was choosing to live the rest of my life on my own terms. Olivia had tried to break me down, to make me lose confidence, to turn me into a shadow of myself. But she had underestimated the strength of a woman pushed to her limits. I was ready for a new beginning. On a bright Saturday morning, Evelyn arrived early with her son-in-law, bringing a small moving truck to help me. I had spent the week packing everything neatly and quietly. My whole life, with all its memories, was now contained in a few cardboard boxes. Every small item carried a piece of my past and my strength. Daniel helped load the boxes in heavy silence that broke my heart. He tried to stay composed, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. He kept asking, "Are you sure about this, Mom? Do you want to stay a few more days to think it over?" I just smiled, gentle but firm. "I've made up my mind, sweetheart." Olivia stood by the living room window, pretending to arrange magazines while secretly watching. She didn't say a word, didn't help, didn't even look sad. When I said goodbye, she only gave a polite nod and that same fake smile. But this time, I noticed something different: relief mixed with unease. She had gotten what she wanted, but not in the way she had planned. The children, on the other hand, were confused. Sophie asked, "Grandma, why are you leaving? Did I do something wrong?" I hugged her tightly and explained that sometimes adults need change, that I was still her grandmother, just living somewhere else. Ethan cried. saying he would miss my bedtime stories. I promised that they could visit any time, that I'd have a special room for them at my new place, and that we'd discover new adventures together. I tried to make that farewell a positive memory, the start of a new chapter, not a loss. When I arrived at my new apartment, I was overwhelmed with emotion. It was small and simple, but completely mine. No one could ever make me feel like a burden again. No one could question my presence in my own home. Every corner of love, that apartment reflected me, arranged the way I liked, decorated with things I loved. Evelyn stayed the whole day, helping me clean, fold clothes, set up the furniture, and hang family photos on the walls. When everything was done, I looked around and saw more than just an apartment. I saw a new beginning, a place where I could finally live as myself, without judgment or pretense. That first night alone, I made a simple dinner and sat at the small table by the window, looking out at the quiet street. I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. No critical stares, no sharp words, only the warm silence of a real home. In the days that followed, I slowly built new routines. I woke up when my body wanted to, enjoyed a slow breakfast, read the morning paper, walked around Forsyth Park, chatted with other seniors, and explored the little cafes nearby. Each day felt like a small discovery, a chance to live freely, without asking permission from anyone. Daniel called me every day, checking in to see if I needed anything. I could hear the genuine concern in his voice, but I also sensed that he was slowly accepting the change. On weekends, he brought Sophie and Ethan to visit me. The visits were short but meaningful, warmer and closer than ever before. One afternoon, during one of those visits, Daniel asked me a question that caught me off guard. He said Olivia had mentioned that, before I moved out, I seemed different. That she was worried something might be wrong with my health. Daniel looked at me and asked softly, "Mom, is there something you haven't told me?" I looked at the son I had protected all my life, and for a moment, I wanted to tell him everything that his wife had once tried to harm me, that I had uncovered her terrible plan. But I knew that if I did, his marriage might fall apart, and my grandchildren would be hurt. I couldn't do that. Once again, I chose to protect my son. I said gently that yes, I had gone through a time of deep reflection, thinking about my role, about the meaning of life, that sometimes older people have a kind of late life crisis, a need to prove they can still stand on their own. I told him that moving out was a precaution, not an escape. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I really admire you, Mom. Not many people at 72 have the courage to start over." His words filled me with emotion and confirmed that I had done the right thing by not pulling him into that toxic web. 3 months later, something unexpected happened. Evelyn came to visit, looking worried. She said the neighbors had been talking, there were arguments at Daniel's house. The kids looked tired, and Olivia had been leaving home at strange hours. A week later, Daniel showed up at my apartment exhausted, hollow-eyed, dark circles under his eyes. He said his marriage was falling apart, that Olivia hadn't been the same since I moved out. She was going out frequently, coming home late, always with vague excuses, and when he questioned her, she simply said she needed more freedom. Eventually, Daniel discovered that Olivia was seeing another man. Hearing that, my heart ached. But deep down, I understood Olivia's mask had finally fallen. Without me around to blame or to unload her frustrations on, she had revealed her true nature. Daniel asked me, "Mom, did you ever notice anything strange before you left? Something I missed?" I looked at him with tenderness and simply said, "I did notice." Olivia seemed uneasy, but I never imagined it was this serious. In the months that followed, I quietly watched from afar. Olivia moved out, renting a small apartment downtown, leaving the kids for Daniel to care for. She only came to pick them up on weekends when it was convenient for her. She had become the very kind of absent mother she once looked down on in others. Sophie and Ethan began visiting me more often. Daniel brought them over in the afternoons, and I could see the confusion in their eyes. I tried to make my home a safe haven, a place where they could express their feelings without fear of judgment. Through the kids, I learned that Olivia was seeing a married man she had met in an online chat group. She bragged to her friends that she was finally living for herself, that she had wasted years, caring for a family that never appreciated her, and that I was the burden she had escaped. Those words helped me understand everything. Olivia's actions hadn't just come from cruelty. She saw me as the final obstacle to her so-called freedom. She believed that if I disappeared, Daniel would accept her selfishness and emotional distance. But reality proved her wrong. Once I was gone, she had no one left to blame, and she was forced to face herself. That's when her true self finally emerged. 6 months after I moved out, Daniel came to visit me with an unexpected proposal. He said he wanted to move into a larger apartment, closer to mine, so we could see each other more often. He wanted to rebuild his life, to create a home where I would still have my own space, but be near my grandchildren. I looked at my son, Daniel, and saw a man who had finally grown, a man who had learned painful but valuable lessons about love and family. He now understood the value of those who truly care for him, and he never wanted to repeat the mistakes that had almost cost him his mother. Now, 1 year has passed since the morning Olivia handed me that strange-smelling cup of coffee. I can truly say that I've found a peace I never knew before, a harmony I built myself, through decisions made for my own mental health and happiness. Daniel lives just 2 blocks away. Our relationship has never been stronger or more respectful. Sophie and Ethan visit almost every day after school. We've created a new kind of family, not bound by obligation, but built on genuine love and mutual respect. As for Olivia, she's vanished from our lives. She calls the kids occasionally, always with an excuse about being busy, and rarely visits. Now, she's become exactly the kind of mother she once despised, selfish, chasing her own desires over her family. Sometimes I ask myself if I was too harsh, if I should have tried to save my son's marriage. But then, I remember those long months in that house, being disrespected, made to feel afraid, stripped of my dignity. I remember the strange-smelling cup of coffee, the hidden documents, and the scheme I accidentally uncovered. And I understand that on that day, I didn't just save my own life. I saved Daniel from a toxic relationship, my grandchildren from a childhood built on lies, and our family from someone willing to do anything to get what she wanted. Now, every morning, as I watch the sun rise through the window of my small apartment, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. I'm grateful that I found the strength to stand up again, to realize that I could still choose a new direction for my life. I've learned that kindness does not mean weakness, that being gentle does not mean enduring abuse, and that self-love is the foundation of every other kind of love. If this story has touched your heart, remember it's never too late to start over. Age does not define your strength. Life has taught me that true love does not demand extreme sacrifice, does not ask us to accept pain, and does not force us to live on the fragments of affection. True love sees you, respects you, and cherishes you for who you are, not for what you can give. And that is the love I found when I learned to love myself first, when I chose dignity, safety, and peace. When I understood that taking care of myself wasn't selfish, but necessary. Now, I am a fulfilled woman, not because I have everything, but because I have something far more precious. The certainty that I deserve respect, the courage to reclaim my dignity, and the wisdom to know when it's time to begin again. This story is fictional, inspired by true experiences, with names and places changed to protect privacy. Monica chose to step out of the shadow of fear, to reclaim her voice and her dignity, a journey not everyone has the courage to take. Perhaps, in life, we all face a choice like Monica's. to stay silent for peace, or to speak up for ourselves. There's no absolute right answer, only the quiet truth that integrity and self-respect are always worth protecting. If you've ever faced something similar, remember God sees every tear and blesses every honest heart. Thank you for listening to this story. Please continue watching the 2 most loved videos now appearing on your screen. You might just find a piece of yourself within them.